right, Ella, we are rocking and rolling. How are you?
I'm good. How are you, Matt?
Good. I've been looking forward to this one for a while. Your work is very interesting to me because you do something that's a little bit unique in the UFO conversation, is where you're really tying it to ancient text, theology, religion, and you're intertwining that into the UFO conversation, which I think is quite valid. There's plenty of evidence to support there are some ties there. Maybe you can just start off by telling everybody who you are, and then we'll get into some of your work.
Yeah, I've been an experiencer since the age of 2, and I've had a lot of different types of experiences, both what I would call dark forces and light forces. In my quest to understand what was happening to me, I had to learn discernment. And there's that old saying, you teach what you need to learn. And so that's what my books are about, discernment.
Very interesting. And Who's Who in the Cosmic Zoo? This is a series of books that you've written. And one of the other things I think you're doing is you're saying the thing that I think a lot of people in the UFO community are all thinking, but nobody's really saying, because it's almost like it's taboo to talk about the beings or these the contact. And so I want to get into that because I think this is an interesting conversation. Can you tell me a little bit about Who's Who in the Cosmic Zoo and what these books are about and what motivated you to write these?
Yes. So back in the 90s, I was living in the St. Pete area of Florida, and I was a professional astrologer. And I had people come to me and talk to me about their experiences. So I thought maybe it's in the chart. And so that's the first place I looked. And one thing led to another. And I was given the opportunity to teach classes at this metaphysical.
Hey guys, I just wanted to take a quick moment to thank you all for tuning in. If you're enjoying this episode and want to help us uncover more mysteries of the universe, don't forget to support Curious Dimension. If you're watching on YouTube, go ahead and hit the like button. It really helps get this content in front of more people who are curious just like you. And while you're at it, subscribe to the channel so you never miss an episode. Don't forget to click that notification bell too, so you're the first to know when we release new content. For those of you listening on your favorite podcast platform, make sure to follow or subscribe to the show and leave us a rating and a review. It helps more than you know. And whether you're watching or listening, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below or send me a message. Thanks for being part of the Curious Dimension community. Your support keeps this journey going.
Or there called Wings of Light. They're out of business now, but for the 90s. And that was what I did every week. And it was called ETs, Aliens, or Angels. So I eventually decided to put it in a book. And when I was writing the book for years, then I had a baby and I had to shelf it. And then as she grew and became more independent, I went back to it. And then I had a near death experience. I saw Yeshua and he took my hand and we walked on this like green grass field with a bluebird sky, just the two of us. And it was hand in hand. And he told me that he said I was going to be okay. He was going to send me back and I wasn't ready yet. And that he wanted me to rewrite my book about the ETs and the aliens with him in it. So I did. And it's turned into 7 books.
Wow. Wow. One thing you mentioned, I watched one of your other interviews. I think it was on Hannibal that came out maybe about a month ago. And you brought up somebody pretty important, Haim Eshed, who was the father of the Israeli space program. And he said some explosive things, I guess basically at the end of his career. But he was a very well respected head of the space program of Israel. And can you talk a little bit about the ties? I guess that the US has ties with Israel, and he's saying these explosive things. Can you comment on what he said and like the nature of what he said?
Yes, this was in the height of the pandemic, November 2020, November and December of 2020, when everybody was hazed over by the pandemic. So this kind of ended up below the radar. But he spoke to the Yedidot Achronot, which is the equivalent of the New York Times here. And he basically said to them that the United States and Israel are in working agreements with the Galactic Federation on Earth. Now, I'm sure you've heard all these different terms about the Galactic Federation of Worlds, the Galactic Federation of Light, and they have all these different ways of talking about them. It's in my first book because what I did was I created a chart so that it can help to categorize and discern and identify who these beings are and which side they're on. In every conflict, there's three sides. People think it's two sides, but there's three. And that middle column was what I was told was the Confederation. Okay. So the fact that he said the Federation on Earth was very specific. And this is my conclusion. I'll come back to what else he said, but this is my conclusion of my first book, was that the ET presence, the visitors, the alien abductions, all the stuff that everyone was experiencing and has been, is coming from inside the Earth. It is coming from within. Okay. That doesn't mean that they don't have interstellar capabilities, that they're not traveling back and forth within our solar system and even in other star systems or galaxies. We leave it. But what everyone has been experiencing here is coming from inside the Earth. And I myself got into this really like ufology. I mean, I was always interested in the beings, but I didn't become a MUFON member until I saw a UFO, USO, okay, an underwater submerged object, literally emerge out of the Gulf of what was used to be called Mexico, that is now the Gulf of America, off the coast of Indian Rocks Beach in April of 1995. And I wasn't the only one who saw it, because this was what we did back then. I would go to the beach and watch the sunset with my neighbors, and everybody would hang out. It was balmy and just chit chat. And then I was just hanging out on my own. There were people on the beach, and I started hearing, the sun was already down, and I started hearing this rumbling. And I thought maybe it was a pod of dolphins. And that's something very common. They come close to shore, especially at night, and they feed the fish. But it wasn't. And I thought, what was that? It couldn't be a whale. It was big. And I started to see something emerge. And then I saw metallics, and I thought, whoa, they don't have submarines here. This is too close to shore. And it was about 100 yards off of shore.
Oh, wow.
Saw this disc. It was like a silver classic disc shape, no windows, no nothing. And it just was matte, and it just emerged, and it hovered probably like 20 feet above the ocean, and all the foam, the sea foam, was just falling off of it. And within a New York minute, that thing shot up into the sky, and I watched it like become a star. It got so small. And then I saw this, it looked like a portal was opening up, and it just disappeared. And that was the end of it. And I was gobsmacked. I was like, what the heck did I just see? And
Yeah, imagine.
and so that got me down all these rabbit holes. And I had a friend there who told me, he was a member of MUFON at the time. And he said, oh, MUFON had gotten like 350 calls from people all along the beaches there who saw this from different angles. So I know that I wasn't alone. And so one thing led to another. And I wrote the first book, which came out in 2012. And my conclusion is that they're coming from inside the Earth. And this is why they're in the Bible. This is why they're in all these ancient scriptures. This is why they're in folklore and mythologies. And they're all pretty much more or less the same thing. Okay. And even the Amazonian, Brazilian indigenous tribes, when they were shown pictures of the Greys, they thought, oh, we know who they are. They come from inside the Earth. We see them coming and going. And then, so I found out that there's portals. There's portals all around the planet, and they come and go in these portals. So when Haim Eshed said Galactic Federation on Earth, I took note of that it wasn't all these other groups that people are connecting with. This was happening right here. And then I took some of the information, my own research, and connected the dots to what he said, that this has been going on for a while because we have other whistleblowers who have come forward. For instance, William Tompkins, okay, who you know who he was. He was a lifelong aerospace engineer. And again, at the age of 88, these octogenarians, I guess they feel like, oh, they've lived their life. What do they got to lose? They have to tell people what's going on. And that's exactly what his intention was. And he did. And they, in fact, MUFON named their 2017 symposium after him. And that was the first time they called it the Secret Space Program because that's what he was basically testifying to, that he worked on it.
Yeah, and yes, and I remember that symposium. I remember seeing that online, and as I've been studying this and learning about this, I was first exposed to this all around 2000 when YouTube dropped, and I had no idea that there was any sort of thing going on. I just stumbled upon this, and I wrestled with the topic for about 3 years, going back and forth with it, and then you get to this point where you hear respectable people high up, clearances, no reason to say these things. They're not making any money and they're saying these wild things. And I got to this point where I was like, there's probably several different things going on here. And that's why everyone's very confused about what it is, because it's not just one it.
Right.
It's like you said, there's probably something going on here on the planet now. And that's
Mhm.
maybe what a lot of people see. And then there may be something that's coming from outside the solar system, or there may be something coming from a different time, or there may be something coming from a different dimension. And so it gets confusing
Mhm.
because we may have multiple types of things coming. And this may be why we have reports of so many different kinds of looking things,
I
because it's not
agree.
just one thing. Um,
Totally.
But I'm starting to buy into this idea of the beings here on this planet. I've heard respectable people say this, like Danny Sheehan has just flat out said it, that there are bases under the water and underground, and there are physical beings inhabiting these things. And I get the sense that there may be people high up that know this. And
Yeah,
I don't know, what is your take on that?
absolutely. And high up, how about President Trump? So that was the other part of the message that Haim Eshed told the Yedido Achronot was not only is the United States and Israel in working agreements with the Galactic Federation on Earth, but that President Trump knows about it because this was in November of 2020. He was still the president then. So, yes, higher ups, absolutely. And then he went on to say that there were joint ventures using their astronauts, even NASA astronauts, that were being used on Mars. Okay, he talked about Mars, that they have a joint base on Mars. So I took note of this because in my first book, I have a chapter on Mars, life on Mars, that came from the whistleblower testimony of Andrew Basiago, who I was able to interview, and he gave me permission to write his story, include it in my mix, and he edited it for me. So I made sure I had all the facts straight. And he had a list of names of other people that he was with when they went to Mars. They basically, this was okay. So let me just, for you or for your viewers, you probably already know this, but there were a series of time traveling programs that, because you mentioned from another time, right? So first there was the Philadelphia experiment,
Hmm.
and then that morphed into the Montauk Project. So in Montauk, all the way at the end of Long Island, underground, this was happening underground, they had this chair that they would abduct these young boys off the streets of Long Island and use their psychic energy to attach themselves to this chair, whether it was like psionics, they were able to time travel, but they hit the wall in 2012. That's what I was told. Okay.
Mm.
Couldn't go beyond 2012 for some reason. Okay. Remember all the stuff about December 21st, 2012? That
Hmm.
actually was an eclipse of the galactic center. which is at 26 degrees of Sagittarius, which is Ophiuchus, okay, the 13th sign. So I thought the Maya somehow tapped into that, but I think it was bigger than that or more relevant to us, because you even mentioned something coming from outside into our solar system, and that would be Nibiru. So that was when Nibiru started to show up. So after I had my death experience, when I, spoke with Yeshua, the other thing he told me was that he was returning, okay? Because it says in the Bible, he's returning at the end of this age. What does that mean? That's the processional age of Pisces. It's astronomical. And we're almost at the end of it. Astronomically speaking, ages go backwards. We go from Pisces to Aquarius instead of Aquarius to Pisces, and we tilt down. And there's 30 degrees, and it's 0 to 29 instead of 1 to 30. And so we're at 4. We're at 4 degrees. 4, 3, 2, 1, 0 is the end of the age. Okay. That is going to happen before the end of this century. So give or take 20, 40 years, because my last book, 6, called Heaven's Witness, is all about calendar shenanigans and time manipulation and the stars and Nibiru. And I prove, based on the history, that Nibiru, every time Nibiru comes around, it changes time. For years, I thought, the Jewish calendar is the most astronomically accurate because they include solar and lunar. Whereas the calendar we're on, the Gregorian, has Roman, it has absolutely no astronomical relevance whatsoever, which is why they're always adding a day every 4 years, and the math doesn't work out. It doesn't even make any sense. But the Jewish calendar is solar and lunar, and it makes sense. And they didn't stop counting. They just kept counting. And then I found out that they deleted 200 years. Okay. And I'm like, what? How? Why? And it was because the math didn't work. It was like, so they just thought, in order to reconcile it, it's like reconciling books, we'll just delete it. So if you were to add that back, hypothetically speaking, we're right now at 5780. We'd be at 5090, which means that's 15 years left for the end of their count. Because the Jews believe that a day is like 1,000 years. It's what it says it's like a primer in the Bible. It says so in the Old Testament. Okay. And it says so in the New. So it's like a corroboration thing. A day is like 1,000 years unto the Lord, and 1,000 years is like a day. So that sounds like time travel to me. Right. So the Jews believe that after the end of the 6,000 years, what happens? The seventh is a rest. Okay. And that is the Messianic age. That's the millennial reign. That's when all this stuff ends and there's a whole new world. They sung about it in the 60s, the fifth dimension and all of that, the age of Aquarius. So I thought maybe we're closer than they let on to be. Why did they delete those 200 years? And my answer is Nibiru. Okay. So that's what's coming out, that's outside of us. And it's getting close.
What do you think Nibiru is? Is it a planet? Is it a craft? Is it both? What do you suspect this is?
It's definitely a planet. Okay. But there's craft that is connected with it for sure. And
Does it have some sort of big orbit around?
Huge. Yes.
Okay. Huge orbit.
So the ancients depicted it as this red disk with wings. Okay. Every place, whether it's Egypt, Persia, which is today's Iran, any place in Mesopotamia, Babylon, Iraq, they all have pictures of it with wings, red with wings. So those wings are comet tails. All right. It has, and I've seen it. We have pictures of it. In fact, in 1982, NASA sent the IRIS probe out to the edge of our solar system, and they came back with a picture of Nibiru, and they showed it to President Ronald Reagan in 1982. And that's when the blackout began, because he wrote an executive order to basically cover it up, because they didn't want people on Earth thinking that, they should just stop paying their bills or stop paying their mortgage. You got to keep the whole debt machine going. they didn't want to upset the apple cart. So they just came out, and it was like him, if you remember the trio, him, Maggie Thatcher, and Gorbachev. And the three of them together had all these meetings about the earth and the climate change. And
Hmm.
that's when it all started. And then he put the weapons in space, the SDI, Strategic Defense Initiative, which he himself dubbed the Star Wars program. The narrative that was given to the media was that this was to protect us, was national security against foreign adversaries on Earth. But the real reason was to get prepared for an alien invasion. And that's because he saw the picture, which got leaked. So in 2003, it was declared. I have it. I could show it to you. If you want to do,
Yeah,
but
send it over to me.
sure. But since then, we've seen multiple pictures of it. And there's Google Earth and Google Sky. So Google
Hmm.
Sky shows you everything that's happening above wherever your location is. So because of his executive order and the blackout for years, that part of Google Sky was blacked out. The only time ever, but it got restored. Okay. So I can show you, I have pictures of it. You can see it. And Nibiru itself. So what's his name? Uh,
Zachariah Sitchin.
oh, wait, I'll get to him. Yes, of
Okay.
course. I studied with him. He was my mentor. And he inspired me. And my fifth book is all about Nibiru, and I devote 3 chapters to him. But Carlos Muñoz Ferrada from the 1940s was a Chilean astronomer who accurately discerned and calculated Nibiru. And he called it Hercules, which was the Greek name for it. But he also called it the comet planet. Okay. So that was probably like the most accurate description of it that answers the question, is it a planet or a spaceship? It's a comet planet. So here's why that's relevant to us, because as it passes, as it comes through, it's not here yet, it's on its way, but as it comes through our solar system, it will not hit the Earth. Okay. But what will happen is that the tails, these two that make it look like it has wings, precede it. That comes first. And it's like a parade. And it's full of comets, asteroids, meteorites, and fireballs.
So it's carrying along with it debris as
Yes.
it's coming.
Yes. 2 debris tails. And that's that's our problem. Okay. Not the planet, because the planet itself is big, but it's not going to, and it has in the past. Manuel Velikovsky wrote about worlds in collision, and Zachariah Sitchin, and what happened to Tiamat and the moons, and how we ended up with the asteroid belt, which happened because of ancient passages of Nibiru that came in with moons and things and knocked into one of the planets in our solar system, which created the asteroid belt. And I find it no coincidence that the beginning of Star Wars, the original first Star Wars, starts off with a planet exploding. Okay.
Mhm.
And because that's part of this history. And there are people that have ancient memories of that. It's
So
wild.
do you subscribe to this idea that some of our artists, producers, songwriters are getting downloads of information and shards of information are interwoven into our pop culture? Do you believe that's a thing?
I do.
And as
Yes,
well as like our scientists maybe getting downloads of information to get little head starts?
I do. Yep. And the scientists who listen to their intuition are really the better of the top of the line scientists, because they're using both sides of their brain.
What do you make? And we can just want to switch gears for just a second here, that we can get
Sure.
back to Nibiru. But what do you make? And I don't know if you're aware of this, like Baron Trump's Marvelous Underground Journey. Are you familiar with this children's book? And then
Yes.
the other one is Project Mars, A Technical Tale by Wernher von Braun. Are you familiar with these two works?
Yes.
So
I didn't read the second one, but I've been looking at the Barron Trump thing lately because it's been all over the
I
place.
find that very odd. That story is what's going on right now
Yeah.
in the White House. And then, so at first I saw that and I was like, that's nothing. And then I saw the Project Mars, which is the tale that Werner von Braun wrote about a boy named Elon who takes people to Mars. I find that very interesting. That's what's playing out. It lends a little bit more credence that maybe some people are more tapped into not this linear timeline. Maybe they're tapped into a different sort of space and they're able to get shards of information and they create it into work. Do you think
Yeah,
I know you think that's a thing.
I absolutely think it's a thing. The whole story or testimony of the whistleblower, Andrew Bashiaga, tells us of another US president who was very much involved with this time travel project. So I was telling you it went from Philadelphia experiment to the Montauk project. And then after the Montauk project ended and they closed that, then they started up another project called Project Pegasus, which was what Andy was involved in. And that was in 1980. And they created like it was an elevator, okay,
The jump room.
in the jump room. Yes,
Okay, I've heard this term before. Yeah.
yep, the Mars jump room. And Barry Soetoro was part of it. And he was in the same class as him. They were all in the same class. And all of them are listed in my first book. There was like 14 of them. Regina Dugan was part of it. And they basically, so his mother, Barack Obama's mother, Ann Dunham, her father, which would be his grandfather, was a lifelong CIA agent. And so he oversaw this secret project and he put his daughter in charge of the kids. So they were all 18. Okay. And Andy was in this class with Barry. Okay. And they succeeded. They got in and they went to Mars and he was there three times and he came back. He wrote a whole paper about life on Mars, what was actually there, the three different life forms. Okay. The plesiosaurus type creatures, which were like, like dinosaurs, but not giant, but bigger than our lizards. And that people needed weapons to defend themselves, that there were also the gray aliens and
Is this all taking place underground on Mars, or is any of this on the surface?
both, both. And the plesiosaurus creatures are, they walk on the surface, and people, they argue about this all the time. But when they see these photos come from the rovers, and it's, well, you're just seeing things like pareidolia, like in clouds, like it's rockology or something. You're just seeing shapes in the rocks, but there's really stuff there. And yes, in answer to your question, then there's the underground. So they did have this underground base. And I think that's what Haim Eshed was alluding to, was the joint agreements and the joint projects that they were working on Mars, underground Mars. Because if anybody wants to, let's say, okay, let's go back to Nibiru. Oh, Nibiru is going to come and it's going to make the surface of the Earth inhabitable for a while. Okay. So they are elite people who've been building underground cities on Earth for decades now. Okay. And that's no secret because they do documentaries about it in Northern Europe and they show, oh, we can fit 950,000 people down here. They're actually proud of what they've done. So they've been preparing for this for a long time because that's how humans have survived on Earth. From ancient cataclysms, they went inside the planet. So why wouldn't they do that on Mars? So they think that, oh, maybe we can plan B was if it didn't work here, then we can go survive on Mars, which is part of this. Okay. But it's not going to be on the surface. It has to be on the inside and they have to make it an oxygenated environment. And we've seen pictures of like smokestacks coming out of the surface, knowing that basically revealing that something's underneath. So this has been going on for I know since 1980.
Are you familiar with the Rendlesham Forest UFO case?
Not in great detail. I'm certainly no expert on it, but
Okay, let's go in a different direction then.
no,
Let's talk.
about what happened.
We can come back to that in a second. We'll put a pin in that one. Let's go back to Nibiru for a second. What is the time frame of this orbit that it has? Is it every 3,000 some years? Is it longer? What's the orbit time?
Yes, I'm sure he published 3,600 years. And then I got a little bit more accuracy on that, which is 3,567. All right, give or take, it's closer
Right.
to 600. But every time it comes around, so it passes the Earth twice. So it comes out, it intersects into our solar system, it goes around our sun and its own sun, which is a dead brown dwarf star, or our sun's binary twin called Nemesis. And Nemesis has 7 planets, and Nibiru is one of them. But Nibiru is the only one that is tilted, elongated, and completely out there. Okay. The other
Mm.
planets that that orbit Nemesis are in a round circular orbit.
Hmm.
We are seeing them show up around our sun. I have pictures of them. They're showing up in the space telescopes. So the space telescopes, and there's like dozens of them. The SOHO, the Helio viewer, the LASCO coronagraph, the Stereo A, Stereo B. There's a whole bunch of them that are focused on the sun. They're monitoring all the stuff that goes on, the solar flares, the coronal mass ejections, and every so often we see spaceships show up around the sun, and we see planets, circular, spherical objects. In fact, there's one that, like clockwork, eclipses our sun every 28 days. It's locked into this orbit. From time to time, they black it out, and it's a 24/7 loop. So it's open to the public. You just need to go to the website. And myself and others, we watch it, we screenshot, you download, you harvest, and then all of a sudden it's gone. Okay.
Right.
But I have evidence of the planets around the sun. I could show you if you want, and spaceships that look exactly like the shapes of these crafts that were written in the temples, like the Ahura Mazda. So I have a picture of one that showed up around the sun, and then the Ahura Mazda looks exactly the same. So maybe my conclusion is that maybe the ancients were trying to tell us something. Why would they take so much effort and time to etch something into stone if it
Yes.
wasn't real? Okay. And then some of them even look like the USS Enterprise, like the Star Trek type ships, or
Mhm.
Millennium Falcon from Star Wars. That dovetails into your question about other people downloading this stuff. How did they get that information?
Mhm.
The truth is stranger than fiction. Which came first?
I agree. Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I've bought into this idea that our scientists are using techniques and getting information from somewhere else. And this is where like quick progression has come from. If you look at the space program, what were we doing 100 years before the space program, right? We're running around on horses and buggies. And next thing we're on the moon 100 years later. And so that's a very quick progression, not to mention splitting the atom. And yeah, there's all these stories where like Jack Parsons, who's this unsung, unnamed person in the American space program, he's out in the desert with L. Ron Hubbard doing sort of exotic magic out there, and then going back to Werner von Braun and saying, "Hey, I've got these ideas," and when they're getting people to the moon. And this other character, Tim Taylor from Diana Sulka's book, who went under the pseudonym Tyler, but he's outed now. He was saying the exact same thing, that there are techniques and ways of tapping in to radically increase your epiphanies while working on these programs. So I, I'm starting to suspect that's for sure a real thing.
Yeah,
Um,
I think the Germans had it way before we did. And Admiral Byrd, who had these 2 experiences in the North and the South Pole, he had experience. His story, that diary, that that I have that story in my book, which I find that just corroborates my conclusion is about who we're living with, who we are coexisting with on this planet, that we've never been alone. They've always been here, but something woke them up. Okay. Because even though there's folklore of the little green men that come out of the forest from time to time. People have been seeing it's been recorded, but something woke up the ships. And why all these crashes and what's been happening since 1947? And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that America dropped atomic bombs on Japan, and the beings who live inside the earth went, wait a minute, now we got to do something about this. Those people, they shouldn't have this type of technology. So they came up and they met with Eisenhower and Nixon. This is a true story. And these were the Nordics, the human looking ones, the blonde,
Mhm.
not all blonde. Some of them have brown hair. And they approached him and they said, look, we'll give you technology that no one in your country needs to be sick again. And if anyone is injured, they can be instantly healed. What we
Mm.
want you to do is put down your nuclear weapons.
Right.
And they said no. They said no. Then, after they said no to the good, call them the good guys, after they said no to the good guys, then the Greys come along and they said, hey, we'll give you ships. We'll teach you how to make interstellar craft. We'll give you technology. And this is the answer as to how we went from horse and buggy to the moon. But we want you to allow us to abduct. We have a list of 50 people here. We're done. And they didn't keep their agreement. Okay. So we have another whistleblower who came forward, Phil Schneider. You heard about him?
I've heard of Phil Schneider. Darcy Weir, I think, did his first documentary on him.
Yeah. And when I first came to Colorado, that was the year, that was the last. So he spoke at this group that I went to called Global Sciences. He picked up his shirt and showed us that he was shot, lasered by the Gray. He had a man-on-man, one-on-one fight with these Grays, and they lasered him, and he had this diagonal scar across his torso, and it caused him to have cancer. So he knew that he was dying of cancer, which is why he knew. And he told us, he said to everyone, he says, if they ever say that I committed suicide, know that I was murdered. And that's exactly what happened here in Denver. But he told us if it wasn't for the whistleblowers, we'd all be like mushrooms, kept in the dark and fed you know what. So I think he was a hero for coming forward, saying everything he said. It's all on record now. You can't take it back. Otherwise, how would we know that this was happening?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, people like to give the whistleblowers a hard time, but without them, there's no pieces to the puzzle, really. You have people up high in the government say things and that they're credible, but then you have these firsthand whistleblowers that come and they tell these wild stories. And sometimes they're just so wild that the public just can't, they're never going to believe it no matter what.
Cognitive dissonance, yeah.
They got cognitive dissonance. They'll be like, there's no way this could possibly be. And so it's almost like the disclosure movement is being packaged in a way to appeal to the masses. And then you've got this subculture group, the UFO community, that's been paying attention to this for decades, have been researching it on their own. They're just passionate and curious people. And they hear this sort of packaged disclosure and they're disappointed because they feel that there's a lot more information that they've heard that they feel is credible and they don't buy it. And so they think there's like an ulterior motive, but when maybe the motivation is just to say, hey, look, not everybody's where you're at. There's a lot of people that just, they don't follow this at all. And if you come right out of the gate saying, hey, yeah, look, there's a base somewhere underneath the planet or in the ocean, and these things have been here forever, and there's been contact with people in government before, it doesn't matter how graphic you make it, they're not going to swallow that pill. So I'm sure the decision was made to bring this out in a way to where the masses can accept it and then slowly start to bring out more information. But I think the big one's going to be, we're not alone. They've recovered craft and that's it. And then it'll start to snowball from there. But they're still working on that. Some people say disclosures already happened. I think disclosures happen for people that follow the topic. I don't think it's happened for the majority of the people.
Yes, I agree. I think that they made a decision at Majestic 12. you're familiar with them, back in the 50s, they were a think tank of these admirals that were in charge, because the Navy is the hierarchy, the top of the militarized, industrialized complex. They were put in charge of this. And they knew that there was going to be leaks, that there was going to be stories, and they kept testing the public to see where the public was at, their level of readiness to be able to process and absorb and accept some of this information. And they came up with a plan, from my understanding of everything I've read, that they thought, okay, soft disclosure is better than hard disclosure for the time being, because it serves a psychological purpose. It helps people to get ready, to prepare for these concepts that would otherwise cause cognitive dissonance and absolute panic, which they were trying to avoid. They gave these concepts, and some of them were even more than concepts. They were like actual stories and the way the ships were, to the filmmakers, so that the films, the movies and the TV, for instance, Star Trek was a top one. And Gene Roddenberry was friends with two of these admirals that was on MJ-12. And they were building these ships. This was part of the secret space program that William Tompkins came forward in 2017. And there's a book that he wrote called Selected by Extraterrestrials, and how he worked side by side with these Nordic beings who were helping the United States with technology, because they were, and it's like, when it comes to times of war, you have to find your ally. Okay. And this is what I did in my book, is I made categorizations of who these aliens were, who the good guys were, and who the bad guys were. And so even the good guys may be considered bad guys to some people, but they were working with us to give us equipment and craft and technology to help us to defend ourselves against the bad guys that were mutual enemies to all of us. Does that make sense? So
Yes.
let's start pulling out names now, like the draconian reptilian lizard group, okay, who Hitler was in direct contact with. In fact, they gave him a spaceship. That's the research. I published it in book 4, Covenants, to help him win his war to genocide the Jews. So you think to yourself, what do they have? What is this Jew hatred? It's supernatural. It's otherworldly. Why were these reptilian beings living inside the earth? Okay. They're not with us here. Okay. But maybe they're the ones pulling the strings. You can say that. You can go that far. You can have your conspiracy theories. But why did they help him genocide the Jews? And now that war is over. Here's the same war, part 3, okay, that are happening. Same energy, same spirit, same objective. Genocide the Jews, wipe Israel off the face. Because back then they didn't have Israel. Israel was made. Israel was put together. Israel was established as a solution to where the Jews can go and have their own homeland, right? That was what was birthed out of World War II. So now World War III is a continuation of the same hatred, but it's just in a different group of people now, which is the jihadists who want to wipe this. I mean, it's no secret. They say it all the time. They chant it. It's not a conspiracy. It's
Hmm.
right out there. Okay. So I connect dots because I look at pattern. That's what science is supposed to be. We're supposed to watch and observe pattern. It's the same thing, just a different century. And so back to the Israelis and the Americans in this joint agreement that Haim Eshed was trying to expose. Now, by the way, he wrote a book with the journalist that he gave the interview that he whistleblowed to from the Adidas. So they helped him write this book, and it's called The Universe and Beyond the Horizon. And it's only available in paperback Hebrew. I had written to them. I said, was there any way you can send it in a PDF? Because with a PDF, you could stick it through a translator and do that. So I managed to extract 13 pages that were specifically only about crashes and the alien being. So I
Mm.
have that. If anyone wants it, they can just contact me. I give it away for free with any book purchase from my website. So they could just contact me on who's who in the cosmiczoo.com. So I translated. So basically, the rest of his book is all about astrophysics and what's all this kind of high-minded stuff. But this is specifically about the crashes. And what I found interesting, Matt, was that he revealed the magenta 1932
The David Grush one they talked
that
about.
David Rush talked about in 2023. He put that in his book in 2020. So that was a corroboration, proving that what Grush said was true. And what Haim Eshed said was that the Germans came and cleaned it up.
Mm.
They got all the tech, they got everything, and the beings, the whole 9 yards.
Because according to David Grush, he said the United States scooped it up, which made you think that they came and brought it back to the United States. But Haim Eshed's saying something different.
Haim Eshed said it was the Germans. Now, that was 1933. So the United States won the war. So we are we get the spoils of war. Our ally was Russia. So Russia and America both have the spoils of World War II, and they shared it together, which was the New Swabia land base
In Antarctica.
Exactly. So that's why the Americans can claim ownership of that stuff now, because they won the war over it. And then, of course, there was the Cold War, which happened afterwards, which the front was about communism, but it was really about the alien tech. And the thing with Russia, if I could just say, because this is like everybody's Russian, the United States and Russia were allies in World War II. I'm repeating. And they shared this base in Antarctica. Not only did they do that, they also transported American astronauts, the Russians, back and forth to the space station, which is ended now, when NASA stopped the space shuttle. Why would an enemy be trusted with your treasure, your human beings, your astronauts, okay, valuable, right? You're in war. It's obvious that they were allies for a very long time, and that the fact that they were not allies, that they were in conflict was some sort of front, because meanwhile, all this stuff was happening. And so people wouldn't even think in their wildest dreams that they were working together.
It's possible to conceive that governments aren't monoliths, right? So there could be factions. There's governments within governments.
Yeah.
So you could have a government that thinks that has an adversary, and there's other agencies and factions within the government that are actually working with the so-called enemy to accomplish another goal. Agendas can sometimes be intertwined, and they can sometimes be in direct opposition of each other. Yeah, I think the details of this probably gets a little bit murky, and there's probably truth to that, right? There's probably truth that there's factions working together when two countries are optically at war.
Yes. And so Haim Eshed listed a bunch of, this is in my piece, they translated 13 pages, that there were crashes in Russia, okay, crashes, and that there were beings that were found, and they were human, and they had oxygen apparatus attached to them.
This is the Magenta crash, or this is a Russian crash?
Well, a different one altogether, Russia.
Okay.
Siberia. Who knows if that was them or if that was future? I have no details about that, except that there were crashes I think he listed about 10, 11 of them all around the world. Okay. Not just here. We just hear about the ones here all the time, Socorro and Roswell. And so you wonder why this whole wave of crashes. Don't you wonder what happened?
Oh, for sure.
Like,
If they're so technologically advanced, what's going on here?
Yeah. And I think that there's these little wars, these little battles going on, and they're getting shot down. And that's something that our government is not willing to step up to the plate and say, yeah, we shot it down. Throw it on our radar, and we sent the little laser thing, and out they messed them up. Something like that.
This is one of the things that Jake Barber is saying, that they're capable of bringing these things down, summoning them is his words, and then bringing them down through psionics. A psionic asset, someone that's able to connect with this thing telepathically. And everyone's okay, that's interesting, but I don't know if anybody's asking the question, should you be doing that? What are you doing? Is that, do you have any clue
Yeah.
what you're doing here? What are you saying? Are you saying that you're able to bring something in that's not man-made, that's from somewhere else, someplace else, sometime else, who knows, bring it into your purview and actually get it to land in front of you? Is that a good idea? What are we doing here, guys?
Oh, what could possibly go wrong?
Ri Yeah, that is absolutely wild, but he's pretty convinced that he and his team can provide the data to support that they can do this. Whether they should or not, I don't know, but he seems pretty convincing that they're able to do this. We've got a few minutes left here, Ella. I wanted
Sure.
to ask you what your take is on the disclosure movement in Washington and this sort of political theater that we see going on over the last couple years. What's your sense of this and where you see this going?
I think we're in disclosure. There's been many pieces of disclosure, and because of where people are at, it needs to come through piece by piece because it would be overwhelming for everyone to get everything all at once. I think it's moving along. I think we're going to see some more pieces come out. There's now a task force that's in place, the congressional committees, and then this classified task force, which is headed by Anna Paulina Luna. And
Mhm.
I think we're going to see stuff come through them. And from what I hear and know from what they've already said, they know what's going on, but they want to have evidence to back it up before they make an announcement.
Right.
Tim Burchett, he knows that they're coming from out inside the earth. This is a known thing. There's pictures. I have all these pictures of these leaked photos from the Arctic Circle from 1971 from the USS Trepang. Three different types of ships, the cylinder ones, these triangular, not like hard triangle, they're like rounded triangular ones, and then the classic disc, all coming and going in and out of the Arctic Circle. So that's another reason why President Trump wants Greenland. Okay. It's a strategic place. He's even said this, it's not a secret for militaristic purposes, national security, making the world more secure, because they know that there's stuff coming and going. And I think this is so to be fair, I personally don't think there's going to be 100% full disclosure, okay? Because there are pieces of this whole thing that, quite frankly, we don't, the public, okay? That doesn't include people who are working on stuff. We don't need to know the ins and outs. We don't need to know how this ship is working. That's like a technology thing, right? But what we do need to know, what we deserve to know, is who are these beings flying these ships? Who's behind this group and that group and this ship and that ship? That's the kind of information that is relevant, and humans, Earth humans, surface humans, deserve to know that. And who our government is in working agreement with. Let's go back to what Haim Eshed said. Who are they? If they're in working agreement with the Galactic Federation on Earth, I want to know who they are. Are they the Nordics? Are they Greys? Are they blue beings? There's so many, it's a cosmic zoo of them. So who are our allies? Who's on our side? Who's helping us and who's against us? That that's the kind of information that they need to disclose to the public. How the ships work, all the technology, let that be kept for national security. I
I think
respect that. And I respect national security because for lots of reasons, we have players on this planet that don't deserve that information. So if it surfaces here in us, then they'll get it. That's
mhm.
something that is a worthy thing of holding back. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
The beings, I think we deserve to know who our neighbors are, who we've been living with all these years.
Yeah. That's a great way, I think, to end this one, Ella. I agree with you. There's a lot of questions out there. I hope that information comes out. It does seem like it's picking up steam, and I think your voice in this conversation is a very important one. Can you tell people how they can find you, your work? Where can people locate Ella LeBain?
I'm at who's who in the cosmic zoo.com, and I'm on Amazon worldwide. And you can also find me on Facebook. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, this was a lot of fun, Ella. I'd love to have you
Thank
back
you.
on sometime.
Thank you.
We could talk all day with this. This is amazing stuff.
And thank you so
But I'm
much.
going to hit the record button. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for watching the show. I hope you guys are enjoying the content. If you're finding any value, please hit that subscribe button, that like button, and leave a comment. It doesn't cost you anything, and it really helps out the show.